begin in 60 seconds.
Good morning, Jonathan Godfrey speaking. I am the chair for this session. It's my warm pleasure to invite Ron Baker to offer this morning's karakia.
Kia ora, Jonathan. Ngā mihi kia tātou katoa. Well, welcome, Jonathan. Greetings to everybody. Ka tira, tō tātou nei pokaro nui, ke te huri nei tō tātou nei pokaro ke runga ake ki te wahinga. Our thoughts this morning are to be with our Creator. Nō reira, e tō mātou matu i te rangi, Almighty Heavenly Father. Kei te tau mai hoki nei o ponona ke muatu aro. We, your humble servants, come before thee. Hei ina te kia koe, hei whakapiri mai kia mātou, and ask that thy presence be with us. Anei mātou hoki nei tukua mai, e nei ta mātou nei reo whakamoemeti whakapetai kia koe. Mo au nei manakitanga e toana ki rungi mātou katoa. And we give thanks for the many blessings that they have blessed us with, and for gathering us here together this day. Nō reira te matua, whakapiri mai, be with us. Whakataungia mai na manakitanga ki rungi mātou katoa. Give thy blessings upon us. Kia takoto pai nā kōrero, nā kaupapa, kia whakaora ai hoki nei tātou ki runga tamato o te whenua. That we may have your blessings and our deliberations for our journey, our wellness journey this day. And before us, nō reira te matua whakapiri mai. Tau mai o manakitanga ki runga tēnā, ia tēnā o tātou. And to all of those who are going to contribute today, manaki tia mai. Hapai tia rātou kia takoto pai e nei kōrero. Uplift them to be able to lay before us their thoughts, their deliberations, o tō tātou nei oranga, for our wellness, for the things that are important to us. Nō reira te matua, whakapiri mai. Whakatūwhera nei tēnei tō tātou nei kaupapa tēnei wā, and open our time together, kei runga hoki te ingoa tapu, tō tātou kai whakaora iu krai te ake. Amen. Kia ora tātou, kei te mihi nui hoki nei kia tātou. And greetings to everybody. Koutou katoa, e mā taki mai anō ki nei ki runga te tēnei pōhaka whakata nei. All of you who are watching and who are listening on our, what do they call this thing? Rorohiko. TV screens and the screens and all around the country. Nō reira, hara mai whakatau mai. Ka we mai nā hoatanga tō koutou nei tupuna. Bring forward those things which are your ancestors and the mauri that is with you. Kia takoto pāriki wangi tātou, and lay them before us. Hei kōrero mō tātou, kia whakakaha mai tō mātou haere ki runga tamato o te whenua. So that we may journey forth in wellness and strength, and in the manner in which we are blessed and important to do. Nō reira tēnei te miha te kia tātou katoa, huri noa, hara mai, haira mai. Nō reira tēnā koutou. And we're going to sing our waiata now.
Ai, waiata mai.
Oh, who's going to start, me or you? Me? E hara.
I te mea no ai
Te
Aroha
aroha
noa.
tukunai
kukui
tukuiho.
ho.
Tukuiho.
Ho.
Te whenua. Te whenua he oranga. Mo te inonga. Tukunai tukuiho. E tukuiho. Tumanako. Wakapono o te menui. Ko te aroha nohonga. Tupuna I tukuiho. E tukuiho. Nō reira ka huri ake na miha te kia koutou kina ki weha I tō tārai. Koutou o tērā marae o tērā marae. Koutou hoki nā mate. Aha ko no hea, aha ko I hea. Tēnei te miha te kia koutou haere koutou nā mate. We turn our thoughts again to those who have passed from the many places, the many marae, the many places of this country. We say, go on your journey as your journey should have you to the place where our ancestors are. Waiho tia mai nā huatanga ki o mātou ki te tūkaha mai te au tūroa nei, and us who are left behind in this this day, we turn to each other and we say, tēnā koutou, hara mai, whakatau mai. Kia ora tātou. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron.
And kahuri kia koe, Mr. Facilitator.
Thank you. This morning's theme is on poverty. It's an issue that doesn't just affect disabled people, but disabled people are disproportionately represented in the poverty statistics. I'm just going to take a little moment to tell you a little bit about the way we're proceeding, and then we'll get into it as soon as we can. We will start with an opening statement from the IMM, followed by questions that were prepared and shared with government 3 weeks ago. We will listen to their answers. The IMM has not seen or heard the answers that we will hear with you today. There are moderators for this session, and there are people going to ask questions. That small group of people will be using the break between the two publicly broadcast parts of this morning to formulate supplementary questions to put back to government. You should be able, as part of our audience, to engage as well. And we did see some comments made by the audience yesterday, and they are very welcome. Where you found the link that you have currently used so that you can hear my voice right now, there will also be reference to a tool called Slido. Slido is just a web page where you can type in your question. Please follow the instructions and you can join us that way. In a question asked yesterday, we were asked if recordings will be made available, and the answer is yes. And the recording of the first session I know is already available. So we will be able to share those recordings with people who couldn't join us live. I'm going to introduce everyone who asks a question by name. I can assure you that everyone with a front-facing role in this forum identifies as a disabled person. I will be turning to the government's lead, Fiona Carter-Giddings, who will introduce her colleagues to answer each of the questions as government has planned. We will not be asking any additional questions in this session unless it is necessary for clarification. And I would be the one who does that. So, without further ado, how about we go to the opening statement prepared by the IMM to be delivered by Dr. Esther Woodbury from the Human Rights Commission. Esther. We're not hearing you yet, Esther.
Apologies. Tēnā koutou katoa. There are a number of ways that Statistics New Zealand measures poverty, low income and material hardship in Aotearoa New Zealand. Disabled people are overrepresented in every measure. 64% of disabled people in Aotearoa, nearly 2 out of 3, have an income of $30,000 a year or less. In fact, less is the key word here. Disabled people's median income is $20,000 a year. Working age disabled people, meaning those aged 15 to 64 years old, received a median personal income of $353 per week in 2018, less than half that of non-disabled people in the same age group, being $806. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, disabled adults are twice as likely as non-disabled adults to indicate they do not have enough money to meet everyday needs. Even within the broad umbrella of disability, distribution of income and material hardship is not evenly experienced. Instead, poverty is affected by a range of intersecting factors. Tangata whaikaha Māori adults, for example, are 3 times as likely as non-disabled Māori adults to indicate they do not have enough money to meet everyday needs. The experience of poverty, low income and material hardship is often related to whether somebody is in employment or not. The employment rate of disabled men is 43.9%, compared to the employment rate of non-disabled men, which is 83.4%. The employment rate of disabled women is 41.2%, even lower than the rate for disabled men. However, even if we exclusively focus on the financial position of working age disabled people who are in employment, we still see disabled people experiencing inequities. Disabled people in employment have a median weekly income of $144 less than non-disabled people in employment. That is nearly $7,500 less every year. In New Zealand, poverty has quite often been talked about and measured specifically through a lens of child poverty. While recent figures show rates of child poverty have improved slightly in the last year, the improvements have not been felt equally across all groups. For example, for children living in a disabled household, poverty rates have actually worsened in 5 out of the 9 measures that Statistics New Zealand uses. Now, data is incredibly important, but it's equally as important to talk about the effects of poverty, what it means for disabled people. Poverty touches every part of a person's life. Inadequate income affects people's housing options, access to food, energy, and information or communication. Poverty affects our access to healthcare. It affects our access to transport, and therefore participation in the community and connection to whānau, relationships, and culture. Poverty can also keep disabled people trapped in violent and controlling relationships or situations. For a considerable number of disabled people, employment is not necessarily a way out of poverty due to barriers to employment, evidence of lower pay in employment, and the increased costs associated with working, such as inaccessible or unaffordable transport. Disabled people in employment can also become ineligible for disability support if they earn over the threshold of a community services card. Levels of poverty and material hardship are particularly concerning for disabled people whose primary income is government welfare. At minimum, 49% of all people who receive a main benefit from the Ministry of Social Development are temporarily or permanently disabled. Disabled people who need long-term income support are likely to incur many of the additional costs associated with poverty and have an inability to withstand crises or unexpected events. Finally, disabled people and their whānau bear many of the additional costs of disability, making it more difficult to achieve stable, healthy housing, equitable health outcomes, and participation in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. We now turn to the questions being put to government. I first call upon Alison Riseborough, a representative of the Muscular Dystrophy Association of New Zealand. Alison, your question, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Question 1. Given higher rates of poverty and material hardship among both Māori and disabled people, as well as the additional costs of disability to individuals and whānau, what actions are the government taking to meet their obligations under Te Tiriti to ensure tangata Waikaha Māori enjoy the right to an equitable and adequate standard of living?
Kia ora, Jonathan and Alison. Just before Fiona replies, can I mihi tuatahi ki Ron? Kia ora moto karakia I tēnei wā. Kia ora moto tautoko ki te kopapa o te hui. He mihi rua, tua rua ki Ranau. He kai waiata. Tēnei te mihi kia koe. Kia ora. Kia Jonathan. Me koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, ngā mihi mahana ki a koutou. Thank you. I'm handing to you, Fiona.
Kia ora, Brian. Kia ora koutou, ko Fiona Carter-Giddings aho. I'm a General Manager at the Ministry of Social Development, and I'll be leading this session on behalf of the government response today. My particular role, just so you're aware, at the Ministry of Social Development is I'm the General Manager of Welfare System and Income Support Policy. To move to Alison's question, thank you, Alison. I'm going to respond to the first question, and then for the follow-up questions, I'll be passing to some of my colleagues from other agencies who can introduce themselves as they speak. So in terms of your first question A, the government is reviewing the foundations of the welfare system as part of the Welfare Overhaul program. We'll hear a bit more about the Welfare Overhaul program through our other answers. This includes work on reviewing the purpose and principles of the Social Security Act. We're developing a Māori values framework and provisions to reflect Te Tiriti o Waitangi responsibilities. As part of the Welfare Overhaul program, supports and services for disabled people, people with health conditions and disabilities, and their carers will be reviewed. The Disability Action Plan 2019 to 2023 is the government's vehicle for implementing the New Zealand Disability Strategy. This is a cross-government work program. The work will be responsive to the needs and potential of all disabled people, including Māori. That concludes my answer to A.
Yeah, Fiona, I'm just going to stop you because I think we haven't given our audience the full sub-questions, A through to F.
Oh, my apologies.
That's all right. I think if that's the worst thing that can happen while we're doing these things, it's going to be a good week.
At the beginning, it's okay.
That's all right. We'll get it sorted. Alison, can you complete the sub-questions so that everyone's on the same page, please? I'm aware that our audience can't read the full value of the question that Fiona's already started answering.
Okay, I can read part B to F. Just get back to my words. Part B. What actions are the government taking to rapidly ensure tangata taikaha Māori and all disabled people enjoy the right to an adequate standard of living?
Okay, for this part of...
No, Alison's going to read C, D, E and F, please.
Oh, okay, sure.
Sorry, I'm just taking a little break between questions.
Yep, we are going to accommodate everyone else's needs, including yours, Alison. Breathe.
Okay. Part C. What actions are the government taking to implement the full recommendations of the Welfare Expert Advisory Group as they relate to disabled people, including providing financial security and social security sufficient for an adequate standard of living? Part D. What action is the government taking to ensure social welfare protections available to disabled people respond to rapid inflation, e.g. 5.9% inflation in 2021, in a timely way? Part E. What action is the government taking to specifically address the cost of housing to disabled people on low incomes and the cost of housing that meets universal design standards? Part F. What effort has been made by the government to quantify and neutralise the additional costs of disability to individuals and whānau? Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Now, that's a massive question with lots of parts to it. Fiona.
Thank you. So what I'll do is we've obviously broken it up and different people are going to respond to different parts of it. So I'll just make sure that we're very clear about who's responding to which part. I responded to part A in case that wasn't clear. I'm sorry.
That was wonderful. Thank you. And can we make sure that your people introduce themselves with their full name and agency, please?
Absolutely. Okay. We'll move to part B of that question then, in which case I'm going to pass to Polly Vowles from the Ministry of Social Development, who can introduce herself. Thank you, Polly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Polly Vowles. I am a Policy Manager in Income Support Policy at the Ministry of Social Development. And as Fiona has said, I'll be responding to question 1B. The government has committed to overhaul the welfare system to ensure that it is fair and accessible for all New Zealanders and provides an adequate standard of living. Progress so far on the welfare overhaul has involved significantly increasing benefits for many people. Between 2020 and 2022, benefit rates have increased initially in 2020 by $25 per week, and then by the end of 22 by a further between $32 and $55 per adult per week. These changes, along with other changes the government has made in income support, mean that compared to 2017, 364,000 individuals and families and whānau on benefits will be better off on average by $109 a week and $133 a week in the winter period by April 2022. The government recognises that there is further work to do. As part of the medium-term priorities in the Welfare Overhaul Work Programme, we will be reviewing financial assistance for disabled people, people with health conditions and disabilities, and their carers. I also wanted to note that there have also been improvements to employment services. The government has invested in supporting people into meaningful and sustainable employment through additional funding to support disabled people and people with health conditions through initiatives such as Oranga Mahi, further disability employment services, and support funds. The government is also working on the Disability Employment Action Plan. That was my answer for 1B. I am also going to answer 1C, which relates to the recommendations of the Welfare Expert Advisory Group. I also just want to apologise if my internet is unreliable. I'm occasionally getting notices that it is a bit unstable, so please let me know if I need to repeat anything. As part of my answer to 1B, I have already mentioned the significant increases to main benefits that this government has made. Additionally, in terms of the WEAG recommendations, these increases bring benefit rates to at least the rates recommended by the Welfare Expert Advisory Group in 2019 by 1 April 2022. Additionally, the indexation of main benefits to average wage growth was implemented in April 2020. As the government signalled when the Welfare Overhaul work programme was launched after the Welfare Expert Advisory Group report, changes of the scale proposed in the Welfare Expert Advisory Group will take significant time to consider, design, and implement. As I stated in the answer for 1B, medium-term priorities include improving financial assistance and employment services for people with health conditions and disabilities and their carers. The government has also developed the Carers Strategy, which is a cross-agency plan that recognises, values and supports carers as an investment in New Zealand's future. The action plan includes new focus on target populations, including Māori, Pacific, young and older carers. And a family and whānau-centred approach will form part of the implementation for developments in this area. Okay.
Thank you, Polly. Polly is also going to answer the next question for us, 1D.
So 1D, the question is about responding to rapid inflation. Various income support rates and thresholds are adjusted annually on the 1st of April by either net average wage growth or increases in the Consumer's Price Index, which is a measure of inflation. Increases to the CPI, sorry, that's the Consumer's Price Index, and net average wage represent the year prior to the December of the previous year. These figures are only published in late January and early February, and very swift decisions are required so that these increases can take effect on 1 April. For 1 April 2022, net average wage growth is 4.71%, while the CPI rate, Consumer's Price Index, apologies, is 5.95%. Main benefit rates, such as the supported living payment, were historically adjusted by increases in the Consumer's Price Index. However, since 2020, they have been adjusted by net average wage growth, which has historically been higher than increases in inflation, or the Consumer's Price Index. This year, main benefit rates will also receive a further top-up, as I've said earlier, to the rates recommended by the Welfare Expert Advisory Group, with an additional $15 per week per adult for families with children. Most supplementary assistance is adjusted by increases in the Consumer Price Index. This includes the disability allowance rates and income limits, and the child disability allowance rate. These annual increases help to mitigate the cost pressures that low-income people may face. But as I stated in response to the earlier question, the government also recognises there is further work to do through the Welfare Overhaul work programme on further improving income adequacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. I'm just wondering if it's also worth mentioning the change in the thresholds, or we cover that later. Abatement rate threshold. We can cover that later.
Yeah, later.
Okay, thanks, Polly. We're now going to move to 1E, and this is the question, what actions is the government taking to specifically address the cost of housing for disabled people on low incomes and the cost of housing that meets universal design standards? We propose to respond to this question in two parts, and two different people will speak to this. On behalf of the Ministry, we'll first have the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, followed again by Polly from the Ministry of Social Development, and I will introduce them as they are both speaking. So first I'm going to pass to Fleur Keys from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, who will read the first answer. Thank you, Fleur.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Fleur Keys. I'm a Principal Policy Analyst in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. The Ministry is responsible for strategy, policy, funding, monitoring and regulation of New Zealand's housing and urban development system. We work alongside agencies such as Kāinga Ora, the Ministry of Social Development, to improve housing outcomes for New Zealanders. The Ministry is leading the government policy statement of urban and housing development. This communicates the long-term vision for our housing and urban development system and how government will work with others to make this happen. One of the published priorities to ensure houses meet needs is to increase the supply of universally designed and accessible housing. To achieve this, the government is committed to, firstly, working with disabled people and disability advocates, iwi and Māori, and industry to increase the proportion of new build homes that are accessible and universally designed, including through government regulatory levers. Secondly, we are looking to provide stronger government leadership, including upgrades to existing government-owned housing stock. For example, upgrades run through Kāinga Ora's retrofit program, and actively supporting and encouraging public housing new builds that meet accessibility and universal design standards. Thirdly, we are implementing monitoring to understand what accessible and adaptable housing stock is being delivered and work out where we can best provide additional support. With these commitments, alongside other government policy statement priorities, we are expecting that over the coming decades, Aotearoa New Zealand will see more housing supply in more places, supplied at a lower cost, and offering a greater variety of housing types, including different sizes, layouts, and tenures, and in different locations. To achieve this, the government will work with relevant stakeholders and focus on building genuine and enduring relationships as part of GPS implementation. The government policy statement includes a set of baseline indicators, measures that together will show how we are making progress toward achieving our desired outcomes and realising our shared vision. These indicators reflect data that's available now, and we will continue to identify additional measures that will help us measure progress as we go. It has been identified that a lack of data is a barrier to supporting disabled people, and we know that regular reporting and monitoring is key to understanding how progress is being made. The Ministry will also be leading the implementation plan of the government policy statement, the first of which will be published later this year. In addition, the Aotearoa New Zealand Homelessness Action Plan, which was launched in February 2020, is a multi-year plan delivered through a collaborative cross-government commitment that homelessness is prevented where possible or is rare, brief, and non-recurring. The 18-month review of the Homelessness Action Plan was publicly released this year and shows that all of the 18 immediate actions are tracking well. We know how important good prevention and support systems are for making sure that disabled people at risk of homelessness don't fall through the gaps. Increasing focus on prevention initiatives is currently underway. Disabled people, particularly those with accessibility requirements, experience difficulties finding a home that adequately meets their needs. This is why the Homelessness Action Plan acknowledges that disabled people are one of several groups who are disproportionately at risk of homelessness, signalling the need for tailored responses that address housing barriers that disabled people face. The Ministry will be undertaking further work in 2022, focusing on disabled people as a priority group at risk of homelessness. That's the end of my statement.
Fleur, for that response. I'm now going to pass to Polly for the response on behalf of MSD at the Ministry of Social Development for this question. Thank you, Polly.
Hello everyone, this is Polly Vowles from MSD again. People on low incomes are able to access MSD's accommodation supplement to contribute to their housing costs. A further payment, temporary additional support, is also available to assist with housing costs for people who are struggling to meet essential costs. A fundamental review of housing subsidies is part of the long-term welfare overhaul work programme. Thank you.
Kia ora, Polly, Fiona speaking. We're now going to move to 1F and I'll respond to that on behalf of officials. As mentioned earlier, and sorry, that 1F was what effort has been made by the government to quantify and neutralise the additional costs of disability to individuals and whānau. As mentioned earlier, main benefit rates have been increased and will increase further on 1 April 2022. The indexation of main benefits to average wage growth was implemented in April 2020. More work is required, which will be considered as part of the welfare overhaul work programme. We have also removed mandatory review periods for people receiving job seeker health conditions and disability benefit. This will simplify the process for clients and reduce visits to the doctor for compliance purposes. We will continue to work towards improving support and services for people with health conditions and disabilities and their carers, including financial assistance. Thanks.
Jonathan speaking. Fiona, I'm going to make a comment about how much time we've got and how much time people have to respond. My rough estimate was that it took nearly half of your allotted 10 minutes to get through the first two. bullet points, and a lot of the time for government to give a meaningful response to disabled people about disabled people was expended on things that aren't about disabled people. It's eating into the time you now have available to answer the remaining 6 questions before we stop at 10:20.
Thank you.
I'm giving
Shall I
you fair.
respond?
I'm giving you fair warning. We are stopping at 10:20.
That's fine. Thank you, Fiona speaking. I guess in response, just to note that our answers to the first section are longer than some of the other questions, so I'm hopeful we will get through that.
Thank you.
To the others on the call, I think some of our sections will need to reduce. So when I get to your section, I will just signal that. In particular, there are a couple that are quite long.
Right.
So the people speaking will need to use their judgment on how to shorten those.
Thank you. Let's get us back on track then. We are back for question 2 with Esther Woodbury. Esther, please.
Jonathan. Question 2. What actions have the government taken to ensure current and future social welfare protection legislation and policies that relate to disabled people are adequate to live a life with dignity and are equitable across the social sector, as recommended by the Welfare Expert Advisory Group in 2019? So I've got a few questions I'm going to run through. A, how is the government addressing the inequity of different social welfare and protection entitlements which are based on origin and length of impairment or illness, for example, ACC income support versus MSD income support? B, MSD income support is means tested against a disabled person and their partner's income, as is eligibility for a community services card, which is, as you will know, a prerequisite for accessing some disability support services. Given this situation, how is the government addressing the discrimination based on family and relationship status that disabled people experience when accessing MSD income support and disability support services, as opposed to they're accessing ACC support, which is not means tested against their partner's income? Question C. What consideration and advice has been given to distributional effects of the recently proposed income insurance scheme for disabled people, particularly those not in employment and those on low incomes? D, how does the government consider current and currently proposed social welfare policies, including MSD income support, ACC income support, and the proposed income insurance scheme? How does it align with the government's commitment to the Enabling Good Lives principles? Thank you.
Fiona.
Kia ora, Esther. Again, there are quite a few components to that question, so we'll do our best to shorten the responses, but please do just bear with us because we will be reducing what we are telling you on the spot. So we will do our best. So this is going to be responded to by a number of officials again. I'll just say in terms of the very first part of the question, I think we'd previously answered that, so I will skip that. In terms of A, I'm going to pass to Polly, who does have a very brief answer for you. Thank you, Polly.
Very brief, I promise. So the government is aware of the differences in support provided between agencies, and particularly ACC and MSD, as you highlight. The government is considering opportunities for greater alignment between the health, welfare and ACC systems. This will be explored as part of the long-term welfare overhaul work programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. And Polly's also going to address question 2B.
So 2B was about means tested support. As mentioned above, we're looking at the alignment between systems as part of the long-term welfare overhaul work program. Entitlement to MSD's income support is assessed based on family income. This is a common feature throughout other countries' social welfare systems. Either individualising or removing means testing from main benefits would be a substantial policy change. As previously stated, one of the medium-term priorities for the Welfare Overhaul Work Programme is reviewing financial assistance for people with health conditions, disabled people and their carers. Thank you.
Kia ora, Polly. The next question 2C relates to the recently proposed income insurance scheme, and I'm going to pass to my colleague Amy Hamilton from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment for this question, as it is the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment who are the lead for income insurance. And Amy, I'm conscious that you will need to shorten your answer somewhat. I would say though that this answer is very relevant to disabled people, and we've focused specifically on that. So I'll pass to Amy now. Thank you. Amy, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if others can.
No, we can't.
Okay.
Apologies, rookie mistake there. Yeah, my name is Kia ora, my name is Amy Hamilton. I'm Principal Advisor at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. As Fiona mentioned, this is one of the longer questions, so I will do my best to keep this succinct and short for you. So it is the loss of work capacity due to a health condition or disability that will trigger the access to the New Zealand Income Insurance Scheme, rather than the health or disability condition itself. As Esther noted in her opening address, the employment rate for disabled people compared to non-disabled people is significantly lower. So acknowledging up front, as a result, some disabled people will not be able to take advantage of the scheme as they are not on work, but they will also not be required to contribute to the cost of the scheme. For example, if they're receiving a benefit through work and income, the levy will not be deducted from their benefit payments. So all health conditions and disabilities that cause a loss of work of at least 50%, regardless of working arrangement, will be covered by the scheme. So we think this will go some way to address the current inequity where a person who experiences an accident at work can receive much more support than a person with a non-accidental related health condition or disability, despite a similar loss of ability to work. We know that the Housing Labour Household Force Survey indicates that 20,000 people stop work each year due to a health condition or disability. This number does not include people reducing their hours of work, so the actual number affected is likely to be much higher. The New Zealand Income Insurance Scheme has the potential to benefit these people by providing the time they need to support their health and return to good work. So the proposal to fund the proposal, it is proposed a levy of 1.39% would be applied to persons' wages. We know this could have a material impact for people on low incomes, and we know that disabled people in employment do earn less on average than non-disabled people. So we are looking at options to mitigate the impact the levy could have on those people, which may also help to reduce any adverse distributional impacts on disabled people. And that concludes my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. We're now going to move to question 2D. Again, this has a number of parts. We've been asked about, the question was, how does the government consider current and currently proposed social welfare policies, including MSD income support, income support, and the proposed income insurance scheme align with the government's commitment to the Enabling Good Lives principles? I'm just repeating that because there's a lot to it. I'm going to start. I can speak to the first part of the question around the MSD income support system, and then I will pass to Amy and then to Francis to cover the other aspects of the question. So in relation to MSD income support, it's already mentioned, the Welfare Overhaul Work Programme is the central component of laying the foundations to achieve the government's vision. The work programme has a focus on improving supports and services for disabled people, people with health conditions and their carers. The work programme reflects the EGL principles in a number of ways. Recipients of health and disability benefits have choice and control over how they use their financial support. The welfare system provides people with benefits at a flat rate. Additional supports are also available to help with additional costs, such as housing. A focus of the Welfare Overhaul Work Programme is the improvement of financial support for people relying on the welfare system, as already discussed. We've discussed increasing benefit rates, and also the family tax credit will be increased on the 1st of April 2022. These increases support disabled people reliant on benefit to have greater degree of choice and control over their lives. Steps are being taken to ensure the system is mana enhancing. The government is committed to remove ineffective obligations and sanctions that negatively impact on people. Work is also underway to improve MSD's employment service, including for disabled people. This is to improve overall social and economic outcomes and employment outcomes, and it aligns with the EGL principle of being person-centred. MSD, through WorkBridge, provides support funds to cover the cost of specialised support and equipment for disabled employees, including services, equipment, software and transport. This contributes towards the ordinary life outcomes principle. As part of the welfare overhaul, we will continue to make progress towards these. Alongside the overhaul, there is work to modernise the welfare system so that people can get the support they need more easily. Simplifying the income support system is part of our long-term welfare overhaul program, and it relates to the easy-to-use principle. We want to ensure that people can easily connect with us and get the assistance that they need. As part of the welfare overhaul, there have been a number of steps that have been taken towards creating a mana enhancing system, such as the already mentioned developing a Māori values framework and a reflection of our Te Reti o Waitangi responsibilities, which will also contribute towards the relationship building principle. Removing sanctions, as mentioned before, we'll further explore the removal of other sanctions based on the recommendations from the Welfare Expert Advisory Group. I'm now going to pass to Amy again to briefly cover the component of the question around the income insurance scheme. Thanks, Amy.
Kia ora, Amy Hamilton here. So by providing payments of 80% of a person's previous earnings for 6 months, the New Zealand Income Insurance Scheme will support disabled workers to have greater choice and control over managing their health condition and work or disability. While suitable work is generally good for well-being, there are times when people need time away from work. The payments will remove the financial pressure to remain working or return more quickly to work when this is not supportive of good outcomes. Where people will not be able to return to work due to the severity of their condition, the scheme provides them with the time and financial support to adjust to their changed circumstances. Other features of the New Zealand Income Insurance Scheme support the EGL principles of person-centredness. For example, the intention is that the case management will be tailored to suit the needs of individuals, to recognise and respect their abilities and aspirations for employment and in the workplace. Disabled people who claim through the scheme will be supported to live ordinary lives through opportunities to train, upskill, or undertake other vocational support that supports a return to good work and improving disabled people's labour market outcomes. Thank you.
Kia ora, Amy. I'm now going to pass to Francis from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, who's going to cover the part of the question that relates to the Accident Compensation Corporation. He's representing the ACC policy team from MB. And Francis, I'll get you to introduce yourself first as well before you speak, please.
Thank you, Fiona. My name is Francis van der Krot from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And as Fiona says, I will speak to the accident compensation policy aspect of this answer.
Sorry, Francis, just to point out, we can't see you. You might need to move the camera around, or it could just be me.
I'm not sure why that is, Fiona.
Okay, don't worry, we'll just carry on.
Okay. Overall, the Accident Compensation Scheme, AC scheme, aligns well with the Enabling Good Lives principles. In particular, the AC scheme's focus on tailored rehabilitation and individualised support. The primary purpose of the Accident Compensation Scheme is to provide no-fault compensation for accidental personal injuries. Weekly compensation, paid at 80% of pre-injury earnings, is one of the entitlements available to workers who are unable to perform all their usual work activities because of an injury. Its purpose is to enable workers to meet their everyday expenses and focus on recovery. Around 2/3 of people return to work within 70 days of their incapacity. Those unable to work due to a personal injury suffered when they were under 18 years old are entitled to weekly compensation for loss of potential earnings. The purpose of loss of potential earnings is to both enable people to meet their everyday expenses and compensate people for not being able to start and develop in their jobs due to their injury. Loss of potential earnings is set at 80% of the minimum wage, which is currently $640 per week, set to increase to $678.40 on 1 July 2022. In addition to weekly compensation, the AC scheme provides other entitlements including hospital, primary and secondary care, assistance with transport to treatment and purchasing pharmaceuticals, home health and rehabilitation, and support to return to work. And that concludes our answer on that aspect of the question.
From my reading, Fiona, that's end of that question from you.
Correct. Yes.
I'm going to have to do some fast footwork with our timing. I'm going to suggest that question 3 be moved to being the first question that government responds to in part 3. My suspicion is that it's the one that is the least likely to develop supplementary questions. I'm now going to ask us to move to question 4 and call upon Nathan Bond, President of the Disabled Persons Assembly of New Zealand, to offer that question, please. Nathan, go ahead.
Thanks, Jonathan. What consideration was given to the distributional effects of COVID-19 government spending during the first 2 years of the pandemic, particularly how spending would affect the relative position of disabled people? Thank you.
Kia ora, Fiona speaking again. This is a question that is for the Treasury. The Treasury has provided us with an answer. Unfortunately, they are unable to attend in person, so I will run through their answer. The context for decision-making on government spending has varied greatly across the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the early days of the pandemic, a timely government response was critical to ensuring New Zealanders were kept safe from COVID-19 and the economy was cushioned against unprecedented shock. The first 2 COVID-19 funding rounds provided in May and July 2021 reflected this priority of timeliness. And as a result, initiatives provided less detailed information on their distributional and population impacts than would typically be expected for funding requests. The analysis was made significantly more challenging due to the uncertainty brought on by the pandemic, meaning the analysis undertaken was relatively high level compared to typical budget processes. Funding requests made outside of the funding rounds, for example, through cabinet papers, generally undertook distributional analysis on the proposals in line with the established guidelines. For example, the cabinet paper that agreed the first package of 27 million to support essential social sector services in communities in March 2021 included a dedicated section outlining the disability perspective on proposals and impacts on funding. Some analysis was undertaken of the likely distributional impacts of COVID-19 on particular population groups. As the government has shifted its focus from immediate COVID-19 response to recovery, there has been more opportunity to undertake thorough analysis of the distributional impacts of government spending initiatives. It is the intention to bring COVID-19 response and recovery expenditure back within standard budget processes, meaning information requirements for initiatives seeking new funding will be greater, and the corresponding analysis will be more detailed. Furthermore, evaluations of key COVID-19 response initiatives, such as the wage subsidy scheme, are being undertaken, which will provide greater insight into the impacts of initiatives that was not possible previously under tight timeframes. That concludes the answer from the Treasury to question 4. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We now move to question 5 to be asked by Alison Riseborough. Alison?
Question 5. What actions are the government taking to ensure disabled people, tangata whaikaha Māori and their whānau, are involved in the development, oversight and monitoring of government policies which directly affect adequate standards of living for disabled people, including fiscal, inflation, taxation, housing, employment, social and welfare policies? Thank you.
Kia ora, I know it's Fiona speaking. There's again a lot to that question, but we'll respond to it, I think, in 2 parts. So the first part I'm going to pass to Fleur from Ministry of Housing, Urban Development, and then again I'll pass to Polly from the perspective of the Ministry of Social Development. So we'll start with Fleur. Thanks, Fleur.
Kia ora. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is committed to working with
I think we've lost that person. How about we move to your second person, Fiona, while the first person sorts out their internet?
Okay, we can do that. So I'll pass to Polly from the Ministry of Social Development again. Thanks, Polly.
Hello everyone, this is Polly from the Ministry of Social Development. Sorry, I am getting messages. My internet connection is unstable, so apologies if I also disappear.
Doing fine so far.
So part of the existing policy development process is to determine at an early stage who may be affected by any proposals and how. If any proposed changes are likely to have a substantial impact on a particular population group, including disabled people and Māori, early engagement and consultation is desirable if possible. I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of recent examples of this kind of engagement and consultation. One example is the Accessibility Charter, which was a co-design for an accessible system. The Association of Blind Citizens was involved in the development of the Charter. Input was also sought from each member of the Coalition of Disabled People's Organisations before it went to the Chief Executives Forum for sign-off. This approach is also evident in the work on the establishment unit in the Ministry of Social Development to establish a new ministry for disabled people. Sorry, I'm trying to cut this response down a little bit. So the establishment unit is working with a community steering group and governance group, as well as engaging more widely with disability community groups. The members of these groups represent disabled people, tangata whaikaha Māori, and disability community groups, including whānau whaikaha. Disabled people, tangata whaikaha Māori and their whānau will continue to be involved in the development, oversight and monitoring of the new ministry as it is established. Thank you.
Kia ora, Polly. We'll try to pass back to Fleur now from Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. Fleur, is your internet playing ball with you?
Sorry there, I'm supporting Fleur from HUD. I'm actually best to perhaps come back to it. I'm sorry.
Okay, is that all right, Jonathan, or would you like me to?
If we have time, or can you paraphrase from your notes?
I can try. So I can be corrected if I get this wrong.
If there's any statements of error, they can help you out in the supplementary questions phase. I'll allow a statement to correct anything you blunder.
And I know that Julian is here from Kainga Order as well, so you can also tell me if I misrepresent. So briefly, Te Tuapapa Kura Kainga is committed to working with agencies and stakeholders that hold working relationships with groups advocating for disabled people and tangata whaikaha Māori and their whānau. The current Kainga Order accessibility policy is due for review in 2022, and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development has signalled it will be at the table for these discussions alongside any member-led disability advocacy groups. They also commit to HUD's Ministry of Housing Urban Development's continued presence and commitment to engaging with agency, industry and stakeholders on initiatives such as the Disability Action Plan and ongoing events with the IMM. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development has committed to help enable the housing aspirations of Māori, partnering with Māori to build on successful Māori-led approaches and placing whānau at the centre of decisions. The Maihi Ka Ora National Māori Housing Strategy is strongly connected to the GPS, apologies for the acronyms, Housing and Urban Development through Te Maihi or Te Whare Māori, the Māori Housing Innovation Framework for Action, which acts to guide decisions throughout the policy process. Some disability support services are means tested, despite access to disability supports affecting some disabled people's ability to work as much as they would otherwise be able to. Therefore, some disabled people are prevented from being able to stay in or move into work because of means testing. Disabled people's unemployment, underemployment and low incomes directly affect rates of poverty and standards of living. I think I might have just repeated the wrong part, so my apologies, Jonathan, if I did that.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, the last part wasn't hard, but you did great. Thank you.
My apologies. I think that brings us, Jonathan, to the end of our response for question 5.
Lovely, nice catch. We will now move to Esther Woodbury for the last primary question.
Apologies, I was muted, of course. Kia ora, thank you for that, Jonathan. Question 6. Some disability support services are means tested despite access to disability supports affecting some disabled people's ability to work as much as they would otherwise be able to. Therefore, some disabled people are prevented from being able to stay in or move into work because of this means testing. Disabled people's unemployment, underemployment, and low incomes directly affect rates of poverty and standards of living. Does the government recognise this current system-based contradiction as a welfare or poverty trap? Question A, if so, what action is the government taking to review or remove means tested criteria for accessing disability support? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pass to Polly again from the Ministry of Social Development to address your question. Thank you, Polly.
Thanks, Fiona. So this is Polly from the Ministry of Social Development. The government recognises that means-tested support can create financial disincentives to work. As I've previously stated, and sorry to repeat, further work will be undertaken as part of the Welfare Overhaul work programme to improve financial assistance for disabled people, people with health conditions, and their carers. Another medium-term priority in the Welfare Overhaul work programme is improving employment services for disabled people, people with health conditions and their carers, and this will largely be progressed through the Disability Employment Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Polly, just while you're there, what is medium term, please?
Good question.
Meaning there isn't an answer?
No, I'm looking at the publicly available Welfare Overhaul work programme cabinet paper.
Okay, how about you
So
hold that until after the break, and I'll let you make that statement then.
Cool.
Because I think we've got time to address question 3. If we can cut back to Nathan Bond, we're going to do our best to squeeze it in. Nathan? We don't have you yet, Nathan.
Yeah, I was trying to find the position on my document, sorry, but I'm good now.
Thank you.
What is the government doing to address child poverty's targets not being met for disabled children and children living in a household with at least one disabled person? A, how will the child disability allowance or similar mechanisms feature in addressing child poverty targets for disabled children and children living in a household with at least one disabled person? Thank you.
Kia ora, Nathan. Again, we're going to have 2 parts to this response because it affects both the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet have some things to say, as do MSD. So first I'm going to pass to Hugh Webb from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet to provide the first response, and he will introduce himself. Thanks, Hugh.
Kia ora koutou, ko Hugh Webb, tōku ingoa. I'm from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. The government has made significant investments in data collection that has meant that for the first time we are able to produce year-on-year reporting for rates of child poverty experienced by children impacted by disability since 2019-20. However, we do not yet have the precision in our data necessary to set child poverty targets for subpopulations as part of the Child Poverty Reduction Act. This approach enables us to establish targets for all New Zealand children based on the most reliable national level data, while still ensuring that trends for disabled children and other priority populations can be monitored closely. The most recent data shows that rates of income poverty for children impacted by disability on the before housing costs and after housing costs primary income poverty measures on which the targets are based. These income measures are comparable with rates experienced by New Zealand children overall. However, children impacted by disability are much more likely to experience higher rates of material hardship as measured by the DEP 17 index, assessing whether households do not have 6 or more essential items out of 17 because of cost. Rates on this indicator show that around 21% of disabled children and the same percentage of children in households with at least one disabled person experience material hardship. This compares with 11% of New Zealand children overall who experience material hardship. I will now hand over to Polly Vowles to address the other parts of this question.
Thanks, Hugh. Polly.
Hi everyone. Just going to be very brief with this response, I promise. I think I've already spoken a lot to the recent increases the government has made to households on the lowest income through the welfare system. This has been a significant investment in families, so it's been increases to main benefit rates, also to working for families payments, Best Start tax credit, orphans benefit and unsupported child's benefit, and foster care allowance. Other than that, the government's view is the most recent data highlights the need for consideration of financial support for disabled children and children living in a household with at least one disabled person. And again, sorry to repeat myself, further work will be undertaken as part of the Welfare Overhaul work programme on financial assistance for these groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. That concludes our answer, Jonathan.
Thank you, Fiona. And I did say we were killing us all off at 10:20, which means I've got about 30 seconds to tell people what's happening. We are about to take a 40-minute break. We will resume live at 11 AM. Government will go off in one direction. The IMM will go off in the other. The IMM will be developing supplementary questions in the next 40 minutes to put back to government. I guess that means I just say, mā te wā. See you at 11. Thank you, people.
Kia ora.
Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 AM. Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM Forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining the IMM forum. We are now in the breakout session. Please come back for supplementary questions at 11 a.m. We will begin in 60 seconds.
Welcome back, everybody. It's now time to look into the supplementary questions. Before I do call upon the first supplementary question, we are receiving feedback all the time about the quality of transmission. Obviously, everyone is trying to do their best. We can remind people that we are trying to accommodate every disabled person's needs that we can possibly manage. That includes people who need physical comfort, who need good quality sound, and others who need good quality optics. If we can all try and speak as clearly as possible, that will help everybody understand. And if we can try our best to keep our eyes on roughly where the camera is, that would be even better. I did say that we had to be a little bit flexible, courtesy of having a plan B. I am now calling on Esther Woodbury to offer the supplementary questions from the IMM. Esther, if you can start the supplementary one.
Good, Jonathan. Supplementary question number 1. Yesterday, in the Te Tiriti session, we asked questions about what the government is doing to address the long-lasting poor socioeconomic outcomes for tangata whaikaha Māori, as was noted in the Welfare Expert Advisory Group report. The government indicated these questions would be provided today. So, can you please be clear about initiatives specific to improve outcomes for tangata whaikaha Māori?
It's Jonathan speaking. Fiona, I'm going to look to you in the first instance as the lead for today's session. I hope that your colleagues can indicate which one of them wants to speak. We are looking at about 5 minutes tops per supplementary, please.
Absolutely, thanks, Jonathan. What I'm going to try to do is I will take a best guess at who might be able to answer the questions as they come in so that we can get you the right information. In terms of the first question around tangata whaikaha and Māori and what is being done specifically, the one example that I will use and others can jump in is specifically in relation to, I'm not sure if people are aware, there is some consultation going on at the moment, it's just finishing up, around the foundations of the welfare system, and in particular looking at te tiriti aspects of that and what we could potentially incorporate into legislation to make sure that Māori more generally, and I accept I'm talking in a more general sense, to make sure that those things are considered and clear in legislation. So that's one example now. I know that Huhana Hiki has been involved in that, and I understand that she was asking some of the questions yesterday. And Huhana has pointed us very helpfully in the direction of some people to talk to through that work. So what we're hoping is to bring the voices of disabled Māori in through that mechanism, and then consistently looking at opportunities to do that. Very, very conscious that the Welfare Expert Advisory Group did have a focus on tangata whaikaha Māori, so that is something that we are continuing to take into consideration as we go through the work program.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
You may.
Are there any initiatives specifically targeted for tangata whaikaha Māori and closing their equity gaps?
I'm going to pass to Diane in case she can answer that. It may be. Diane, are you there?
Kia ora, Diane Anderson. We don't have any specifically targeting disabled Māori. We, apart from things like disability allowance, so it doesn't, but they go to anybody with a disability. So we don't have specific ones targeting Māori.
Thank you. Anyone else from government? Jonathan counts to 5 as a general rule. I'll go to Esther again for the second supplementary, if I may.
The recommended benefit rates from the Welfare Expert Advisory Group report were provided in 2019 dollars. Does the government accept that increases in benefit rates in April 2022 are a 3-year lag in raising payments, which disproportionately affect disabled people?
Thanks, Esther. I'm going to pass to Polly Vowles for that question.
Hi, this is Polly. Yes, the benefit rates have been implemented 3 years after they were recommended in 2019, and disabled people are disproportionately affected by that. Thank you.
Anyone else from government? Looks like we're coming to question 3, Esther.
Thank you. How do disabled people get to see how their issues are being prioritised within the welfare system overhaul?
Thanks, Esther. That's a great question. So what the government, through its officials, is trying to do is to make sure that as they make decisions, that's made very transparent. So we will publish the cabinet papers that are considered by government as and when policies go through. We make that as transparent to everyone as we can, including making that accessible. Did anyone else have any responses to that from the team?
I've got a supplementary back to Esther. Brian speaking.
Go ahead, Brian.
In the spirit of dialogue and realizing that people can't say yes to everything you say, what would that look like in terms of greater transparency and better information?
So it's Jonathan speaking. I'll try and steal Esther's thunder a little bit. We think that disabled people need to know that there is actually a plan to meet or discuss or start the ball rolling on their issues. Without being able to see the long-term agenda for the welfare system overhaul, we think we got the words right. It's hard to know when the equity gaps for disabled people will be even on the table for discussion.
Thanks, Jonathan. Shall I respond to the response? I'll give it a go. So probably the most transparent thing we have at the moment is available, and it should be accessible as well, in terms of what the short-term work program, the medium-term work program, and the long-term work program looks like, and that lists a bunch of initiatives under that, and we've run through some of them. A question was raised in the session about what we mean by medium term. We're in the medium term now, so it's this year, it's the next couple of years. Just to acknowledge though that some of the initiatives that would affect disabled as well as general population that were intended to be done in the last 2 years have been somewhat delayed, and I know people are tired of hearing COVID, but have been somewhat delayed by the response that the Ministry of Social Development and other agencies had to do for the COVID response. But that said, there is still a work program available to see publicly on the website, and happy to circulate that wherever is helpful. Thanks.
So there is a publicly available work program that disabled people could look to with a prioritisation, and you will share that later. Have I got that right?
Yes, so sorry, Fiona here. Yes, it's available alongside the cabinet paper that was considered, and it outlines the work program, and yes, it is available, and I'm happy to send it through.
Lovely. Esther, next supplementary, please.
Okay. Is the relationship status of disabled people on the welfare system overhaul work program? The relationship status of disabled people in terms of their access to income support.
Thanks, Esther. Fiona again. Yes, it is in terms of relationship status more generally, and including disabled. And I'm just going to pass to Diane in case she has anything to add to that, or Polly, if not.
Maybe Polly. We have one of the things that we could look at as part of the overhaul, long-term overhaul is settings for health and disability benefits. So that could look at that, but Polly might be better placed to answer relationship questions.
Sure. Polly, do you have anything to add? It's okay if you don't.
Sorry, just struggling to unmute. No, that doesn't appear on the work program, as Fiona has referred to the publicly available work program.
It doesn't appear?
No, not relationship status specifically for disabled people.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So the next supplementary, please.
Thanks, Jonathan. That we are looking into, the phrase we are looking into featured a lot in the primary answers of the session. For example, accessible housing and the proportion of universally designed homes. We don't know much about when evaluations will be done, let alone when actions will be taken. Could you make any comments and talk about timeframes?
Thank you for the questions, Fiona here. I'm going to pass to, I'm going to wait for someone to speak up who has that answer at their fingertips.
I can speak from Kaingora's perspective. Julian Silva here from Kaingora. If you're referring to, or if we want to refer to universal design for Kaingora properties, then we've committed to publish information against our target in our annual report. So that is a performance indicator that government expects from us. So we will be reporting regularly against that deliverable. As well as that, this year we will be refreshing the policy, the 2019 to 22 accessibility policy for Kaingora. It is up for review this year, and as part of that we'll be going through a public engagement process, a fairly intensive process, we hope, which will consult on possible changes to that target in the future. Thank you.
Julian, it's Jonathan speaking. Can I take from that that evaluation is somewhat ongoing?
What do you mean by evaluation?
Evaluating things like the proportion of homes that are needed to be universally designed, etc.
Well, we are trying to achieve as many as we can, and we've started with a particular number, but I don't think we say that number is the right number. That number will be continually reevaluated as time goes on, based on information as it comes through, and and trade-offs and all the other things we need to make a decision on in setting targets with government.
Right, and just one more comment. You mentioned an annual report. Who is ultimately responsible for the content of that annual report? The Chief Executive or the Minister?
It's the, oh, you got me there. I mean, basically under the State Sector Act, we have to report to government every year in our against the contract that we have with the Minister. So it's our report against the expectations that the Minister has set for us.
Right. So disabled people and the IMM who wanted to do anything would all go basically through the Minister's office.
Well, the annual report is a backward-looking document, so it looks at how we reported against last year. We also have accountability documents going forward that actually set our targets. So those targets would reflect any policies that have been worked through. So we would expect in future years where we have changed that policy based on the policy refresh, for example, that would then be reflected in the forward-looking accountability documents and then be reported on annually.
Thank you. I think by teasing you out a little bit, we got a really complete answer there.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Go.
What advice has been given around making the target 100% of new build homes?
We were certainly challenged on that when we did the first policy back in 2019, and we've had a number of public forums since then, and that question always comes up. I guess there's probably two parts to that answer. The first part is that while we've set a target for universal design, that's fully universal design, and we are trying to make all of as many properties as possible meet as many components of universal design as possible. So there'll be a lot that will not quite make the full universal design checklist, but will achieve many of those features. The reasons why we would not have 100%, I think there's a few different reasons. There's some kind of considerations of typology, for example, like, houses that are on slopes or that sort of thing, where meeting full universal design is going to be very difficult. There's certain trade-offs that would need to be made between typologies. So to meet the government's expectations around a big increase in public housing supply, we're needing to do a lot of terraced walk-ups, for example, to be able to take advantage of the density provisions in Auckland. Now, that is sometimes quite difficult to make those universal design. So there's trade-offs between the types of typology. Do you have more 3-story walk-ups or slightly fewer larger houses that are fully universal design? So that, and then fundamentally there's a question there of cost. What are we actually able to fund from the ability that Kaingaroa has of its own balance sheet or from borrowing to do that? So we need to factor in that as well.
Thank you. Esther, I'm going to invite you to move on to the next supplementary, please.
Thank you. How is government measuring the cost of disability that is incurred by disabled people, families and whānau? And in particular, how will whānau and families be sure that the fuller cost of supporting their disabled children will be supported?
Thank you, Fiona here. I'm going to pass to Polly Bowles for this one.
I don't have that information to hand, so I think that's something we would have to come back on. And I don't think there's anyone else who could answer this question.
Okay. It's Jonathan speaking. We anticipated that at some point during supplementary questions for this forum, that we would get to a point like this. The agreement between the IMM and government is that we will be given an answer in due course, and it's a matter of making sure that government has enough time to get the answer that is meaningful to us, and doing that in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Is it reasonable, Polly, in this case, it's not yours to find the answer for, but I need to roughly think of when it is reasonable to hope that government has a response to the IMM. Easter is roughly 3 weeks away.
Do you have any view on that, Fiona? Sorry, this is Polly.
Is 2 weeks enough, Fiona?
We can find out what we can in the 2 weeks. It may be that we don't have all the information anyway, and it would be better to be able to tell you that
Yes.
as quickly as possible if that is the case. But that's what we'd like to have the opportunity to check for you.
Okay.
So we undertake to come back before Easter with an answer on what we do have, and if we need more time to find more information, we can let you know at that point, if that's okay. Jonathan.
That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
So that's the cost of disability and the child. Next one, please, Esther.
How does government evaluate the inequity that arises because a supported living payment recipient must cover at least half of their cost of disability using their main benefit?
Diane or Polly? What's for that?
I'm sorry, I don't actually understand the question. I don't.
So the disability allowance covers up to half of costs of disability that a supported living payment recipient can claim. That means that the other half and other costs of disability must be borne or incurred using the main benefit received by that disabled person, or in the case of children, by their families and whānau.
I'm actually not aware of this policy setting, so again, we might have to come back to you on that one.
Same time frame?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just sorry, Jonathan, Fiona here, just clarifying that question a bit. So is the question why does half need to be met from main benefits?
No, we're looking for recognition that it creates inequities.
Okay.
Because disabled people and their families end up covering the costs, a substantial proportion of the cost of disability using their main benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Esther, we'll come to you for the next supplementary, please.
So the response that we heard from government around welfare aligning with EGL principles largely focused on the interaction of disabled people with government agencies, and not on how social welfare policies and their income support affect the lives of disabled people. Could the government respond to how adequate or rather inadequate income affects the ability of disabled people to live good lives? That's quite a complicated question, obviously.
Thank you, Fiona here. Yes, that is a complicated question. Can I just clarify? So is the question, does the government acknowledge that it is? No, sorry, you'll have to repeat it unless someone else can jump in.
I think essentially quite a lot of the answers from government agencies were about how their agency reflected EGL principles rather than how income support itself affected disabled people's lives, their ability to live a good life in line with the EGL principles.
So Esther, just to clarify, that sounds like similar to the previous two supplementary questions, which is around the adequacy of the welfare system for disabled people given increased costs. Brian speaking. Is that right? It seems like the response will probably be in the response that will be provided later.
I suppose specifically it's around how are adequacy of income and benefit levels, how are they decided, and are those decisions influenced by enabling good lives principles? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. It's Fiona here. That helps. Polly is our expert on how rates are set, so I'm going to pass to her for that aspect of it.
I guess I'd go back to the government's vision for the welfare system, which is one where people can enjoy an adequate standard of living sufficient for participation in the community. And that's definitely the overarching goal of the Welfare Overhaul work programme, and of course the main rationale for the significant increases in benefit rates that have occurred over the last few years. And as I said earlier, the government has recognised that there's more work to do in this space. And so there is an intention to continue to consider the adequacy of financial support in the Welfare Overhaul work programme. Thank you.
And Jonathan speaking, are there any, is there reference to the Enabling Good Lives principles featuring in those discussions and that thinking?
No, this is the Welfare Overhaul work programme is largely a response to the Welfare Expert Advisory Group report, and that is very much what has informed the vision and the work programme.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I asked that. I think, Esther, we're moving to the next supplementary, please.
I don't have any more supplementary questions on our list. So Jonathan,
we
over
ran
to
out
you.
already. Whoosh. Thank you. I've got to quickly check that our next person is online.
Actually, sorry, I do have another question.
You did?
That's just popped up. Apologies. Is it okay to ask that now?
Yes, please.
Thanks. This is a work in progress. What actions are the government taking to remove barriers for disabled people to work? For example, benefit abatement, additional disability costs in work, easy return to benefit if the disabled person has to leave employment.
Thank you. I believe we've got Anne Riley on the call, who is our Manager of Employment. Anne, are you able to respond to that?
Sure. So the question was, what action is the government taking to remove barriers for people going into employment? As you know, Esther, there is a cross-government action plan, Working Matters, Disability Employment Action Plan, which it has been agreed to, and there are quite a range of actions under that action plan, including one of the goals is more and better employment support, and so that includes a whole range of supports to assist people not only to enter employment but also to retain employment and to stay in work, including some measures that do assist with the cost of disability. For example, as you're familiar with, the support funds, which pay for a range of employment and training related costs where people are eligible for those funds for things like equipment and a support person or job coach or interpreters and so forth, and in some cases wage subsidies.
Thank you, Anne. And could I just ask, is there any information about how the employment plan has, or any outcomes to date from that plan?
So what we've been doing is we're very conscious that this is a living plan and that we can add actions to it, but we've also got a monitoring framework for the action plan. And what we've been doing is publishing dashboards which provide an update on the work occurring under the plan, and also using the household labour force survey data. We've been able to track a number of indicators, for example, for disabled people when the HLFE's household labour force supplement for disabled people comes out each year. So, for example, some of those indicators are things like the gap in employment rates between disabled people and non-disabled, gaps in underemployment, underutilisation, the earnings, and so forth. So there isn't a. I would say COVID possibly potentially hasn't. Some is probably likely to be reflected in some of those indicators to some degree, and we'll also take a range of measures to actually sort of shift the dial on some of those indicators. You can certainly make that information available. It is on the MSD website, but I'm very happy to share that information further.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that, Anne, Brian speaking, and Esther?
Sure, that would be great.
I'm just looking at the employment rates pre-COVID and post-COVID for disabled people. So if we go to 2019, employment rate was 22.4% for disabled people. 2021, it's gone up to 25.9%. So a slight increase in employment rates. Got to acknowledge that overall the employment rates are low, but a slight increase, and that's also reflected in labour force participation and unemployment rates. We've pulled the data pre-COVID to the most recent data in COVID just to track those employment rates. And then the other thing I would also add is the lead toolkit on employment for employers. I think that's hosted on the MB website, and the New Zealand Disability Support Network has also developed this further, and that's guidance to employers on one, challenging the myths that disabled people cannot work and participate and contribute, and then guidance on how do you remove the barriers and provide reasonable accommodations in order to do that.
Hi, this is Polly from MSD. I just wanted to mention benefit abatement thresholds because you referenced that specifically in the question. So the benefit abatement thresholds were increased on the 1st of April 2021 by between $35 and $70 a week to enable people to earn more before their benefit starts to reduce, which has sort of helped to improve financial incentives for part-time or smaller amounts of work. So that was a recent action taken. Thank you.
Jonathan, just noting that Alison Riseborough has a question.
Yes, Alison, we know that this topic was coming with your support. Have we addressed everything you wanted included in the question, please?
Obviously the new, sorry, I can't remember the name of the new scheme. The leading work, one that Amy talked about, but I'm interested in any work being done on ensuring people that can go out onto quarter living payment and particularly can go out and work and return back to benefit if the employment doesn't work out. Because that's something that a lot of disabled people talk about, their fear of going into work and then not being able to get back onto benefit, the same benefit. Yeah, so has there been any work done on that? Is that something that NFD will look at?
So for clarity, I think the commonly used term that people out in the wild are using is the stand down period. Am I looking at the stand down period after employment?
The theory, if you're on supported living payment and you go out and you work, and you say you work more than 15 hours a week, that you will won't be able to get back onto supported living payment if you have to cut your hours.
Yep. So it's who am I looking towards? Fiona?
Direct this, but it's Fiona speaking.
Yes.
Yes, I know what Alison's referring to. So it's not just the stand down period; it's the ability to be off work for quite a while. I think that's correct, Alison, and then return to benefit. My understanding, I'm going to look to my colleagues, is there's no additional work going on in that space at the moment. We are looking more generally around the health and disability aspect of the overhaul. It might come up through that, but at the moment it's the current arrangements. But I'm just going to double check that with Polly and Diane, who both are familiar with this.
Diane Anderson here. So people move on SLP can try working for a period of time without any consequence to their coming back onto benefit if that doesn't work out.
And that's, sorry, it's Fiona here, and that's the existing policy.
Yeah.
We're doing, but that
and there is a proposal in the working matters that period that's in here might be extended out by up to 2 years.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, Anne. That's helpful.
It's currently 6 months.
Okay, I'm just going to need to remind you to say who you are.
Oh.
So
Apologies.
We'll learn ourselves. I forget to. My question is that if the rate of disabled people in employment is on the increase, which is what we want to see, is the budget for supporting those people to meet their costs of disability arising from that employment increasing in line with what will then become demand for that support?
Fiona here, Jonathan. I think you're referring to the support funds. Is that?
That's one source, yes.
Okay,
you've gone on me, Fiona.
If there's any work going on in that particular aspect. Have I disappeared? Am I back?
You're coming and going. We got a bit of negative in the middle. No work going on in this area. So try again.
No, no, that wasn't what I said, to clarify.
Yes. I'm going to have to ask someone else to try and answer on Fiona's benefit if you possibly can. Behalf, sorry. Fiona, we've lost you. It's at times like this I wonder if I'm the one who's lost.
You're still here, Jonathan.
Thank you. Are we going to be able to get an answer to this, or are we going to have to pass? We have a little bit of time up our sleeves. I think we'll have to put that supplementary on notice and seek information afterwards. Are there any other questions?
There are some questions from Slido.
No. Unless the team have been phrasing them in a way that's going to work. Has that been managed? Esther, are you going to be able to put any of the questions from Slido in the right speak?
Hopefully. Could I ask the government, and apologies, I cannot see who is there, whether there is any work being done to remove the minimum wage exemption?
Sorry, I just need to, I just want to answer Esther. I don't want them to take questions.
Franca, you're live. We'll take the question on the minimum wage exemption. Is there any answer from government? I've lost government. We will be putting the questions we've received from members of the public through our question moderation process. There will be time to exercise the partnership between IMM and government to ask further clarifying questions. The IMM does not want to put anything in our report to the UN that presents non or unfactual information. That means that some of the questions that we might want to ask will be done privately between now and the finalisation of the IMM's report. The IMM does not want to misrepresent New Zealand in front of the United Nations. We have plenty of time to process the answers that we have received today and those answers that we will receive in the coming weeks, and we will have a chance to increase the dialogue if necessary. I'd like to thank the government officials. Sometimes the best answer really is we have no actions to tell you about, or that there is no plan for that at this stage. That is the degree of honesty that disabled people living in New Zealand deserve from their government. We shouldn't be afraid of the truth. The next session begins at 1 p.m. this afternoon. I'm going to now call on Ron Baker to help us go to our lunch break. From my perspective, I think we've earned a lunch break. I hope you come back refreshed at 1 o'clock. Ron, can I invite you?
Thank you. Nā mihi huri no. Mo e nei kōrero e takotake wai nei tātou. Mō te iwi rawa kore pohara rana. Kia ora everybody for this discussions we've had to do with poverty. Te iwi rawa kore. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou nei. Ka te anō hoki nei, tō tātou nei whakaro ki te runga rawa. Again, our thoughts for this session to our Creator. No reira, e tō mātou matu I te rangi. Almighty Heavenly Father. Ka te taupai hoki mātou nei o ponona ke mua tō araru. We come before thee again. Hei inatu ki a koe, hei whakapiri mai ki a mātou. And ask thy presence be with us. Ka te rā ko runga hea nā kōrero. You have heard our deliberations. Ko runga hea hoki nā hea e whāriki hea wai ni a mātou. And the discussions we have placed before us this day. No reira manaki tia. Manaki tia. manaki tia. Kaita, we ask that blessings be upon this. Ke hapai ake kuine mo tō mātanei oranga haere ke runga tamato o te whenua. That for our journey of wellness in our places that we reside in. Reira manaki tia mai. Waka kape nei tēnei tō tātenei kaupapa, and we ask thy blessings to close our time together tēnei ata. Kei runga hoki te ngoa tapu, tō tātou kai whakaora ake. Amen. Kia ora tātou whānau. We'll see you again at 1 o'clock. Nā mihi.
Thank
Kia
you,
ora,
Pepe.
Jonathan.
Session adjourned.